So today we are going to show you how to make a basic hat. This is one of my favorite ways to make a hat. We're going to be using a double crochet stitch, and I'm talking about US crochet terms. It is the fastest way to make a hat. So I have a few examples here. So both of these are actually from 100% wool. Yeah, of course you can use any other kinds of yarn. So what you're going to need is, of course, your choice of yarn, and I would recommend using chunky wool. This is chunky wool. Crochet hook. So today I'll be using 5mm hook and a pair of scissors. If you don't know how to make a magic ring, there are several videos online that you can learn from, but this is how I make my magic ring. So 2 loops on my right finger just because I'm left-handed, and then I insert my crochet hook through both loops, and I grab this loop and then hook it under. Okay, and then I go back to that same yarn over, pull through that. So this is my magic ring. It takes a bit of practice to create this magic ring and to keep it intact. Okay, so don't get frustrated do get frustrated if you need to, but it will need a bit of practice to do this. So this loop on my hook is not a chain stitch yet. I don't consider it as a chain stitch. We are going to create a series of double crochet stitches within this magic ring. If you're like me and you've looked at several patterns on how to make a hat, there will be different variations. You might have maybe 6, 8, 10, or 12, or even more double crochet stitches within this magic ring. So it really depends on the pattern that you're using. But let's say for this demonstration, let's use 10 double crochet stitches within this magic ring. Since I'll be using double crochet stitch, you can either use 2 chains as your starting chain, or you can use 3 chains. Okay, depends on your personal preference. I like to use 2 chains. If your stitches are a bit on the tight side, I would go for maybe 3 chains. Okay. Personally, I do not count this as a double crochet stitch. Other people do, but for my hats, I don't count this as a double crochet stitch. So we're going to make 10 double crochet stitches within this magic circle or magic ring. So yarn over, insert your hook in the magic ring, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2 loops on the final 2 loops. Okay, so that's 1 double crochet stitches. So I'm going to make 9 more. So that's my second. This is my third. This is my fourth. Fifth. So if you notice, I'm holding this loose end the same line as this loop here. And it's important that that loose end should be where you're working your double crochet stitches. That's what's going to close your magic ring at the end of this first layer. So I currently have 5 double crochet stitches and I need 5 more. So number 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, so if you have lost your count, that's alright. All you have to do is go back to your piece and just count the number of stitches. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I don't count my starting chain here. Okay. So I now have 10 double crochet stitches. So again, for different patterns, you might have a different starting layer. Could be 8 double crochet stitches. It could be maybe 11. It could be that it's not a double crochet. It could be that they start with a half double crochet or even a single stitch. So you pull that loose end to close your magic ring. Okay, I'm just going back to that last stitch, and then I'm going to look for the first double crochet stitch, which is this one, and I'm going to close this circle. Okay, so I've closed my magic ring. I am now going to close the circle, which is the first layer, by inserting my hook in the first double crochet stitch that I made earlier, and I'm going to yarn over and pull through that first double crochet and through my current stitch. So this is the basis of all our hats. Okay, so let's take a look at a hat that I already made. That's going to be the top of the hat. What happens next is that we create the second layer, which is essentially you increase the number of stitches. So for every stitch here, it could be you have 2 double crochet stitches. Okay. And then on the next layer, it's going to be a lot more. So if we have 10 stitches here, let's say we double up on every stitch for the next row, then you would have 20 stitches. Okay. And it goes further and further. So we go back to our piece we were just working with. We slip stitched to close our first row of circle. The next thing to do is to do our chain. So for me, it's going to be 2 chains. For other people, it might be 3 chains. And again, personally, I would not count this as a stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the stitches for the next row. So let's say for this demonstration, I'm going to double up on every row. So double crochet stitch here on the first stitch, and I'm going to do my second double crochet stitch in the same stitch. So I've just worked 2 double crochet stitches in that first stitch, and I'm going to be doing that in the next 9 stitches from the first row. So if we have 10 double crochet stitches in the first row, if we double up on that, then we will have 20 double crochet stitches in the second row. So I'll check. Do we have 20 stitches? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So we have 20 stitches on our second row. So I've done all stitches for that row. And we're going to do the same thing as we did in the first row, which is we look for the first stitch that we did, which is this one, and we're going to slip stitch by inserting our hook through that first stitch, yarning over with our yarn, and then pulling through the first and the last double crochet stitch of the row. So that is our first row and our second row. So essentially that's the trick in making this hat. That's the procedure. So you make your first circle, your first row, and then you simply increase the stitches for every row. Okay, and then you don't keep increasing until the end. You increase up to a certain point, depending on the size of the hat you're making. And then you stop increasing, and you simply work a double crochet stitch for every double crochet stitch of the previous row. Okay, and then you stop up to the point where your hat is the right size for whichever wearer you're going to make it for. Okay. So I'll continue demonstrating by going to our third row. Again, there's a different ways of increasing your stitches. There are certain patterns where you increase for every row, you could double it up. So if we double up the next one for every stitch, it's going to be 40 stitches each, but that's not how I make it. Okay, it could be that you double up on alternate rows, on alternate stitches. So let's say we start off with our beginning chain, and then we could double up on the first stitch and then simply work a double crochet stitch on the next one and double up on the alternate stitch. So that's doubled up, but I'm not going to double up in the next one. I'm simply going to put one double crochet stitch there, but I'm going to double up on the next one. So it all depends on the pattern, but this is essentially the basic idea on how to make a hat. Given that I know there are 20 from the previous row, and then alternate stitches we doubled up, and the other alternate we simply put one double crochet stitch, so there should be 30 in this row. Okay. Alright, so we do the same thing. We close this circle by slip stitching the first and the last double crochet stitch. Right, so that's increasing for every row. Let's say we're making a hat for a teeny tiny person, for a teeny tiny thing, yeah? And let's say we need to stop increasing. Okay, this is just for demonstration purpose. So simple enough is that we just work a double crochet stitch for every double crochet stitch of the previous row. So of course we start off with a chain stitch. For me it's 2 chains. For some of you it might be 3 chains. Okay. So if on the third row we have 30 stitches, on the fourth row, if we're not doubling up or we're not decreasing anything, we should also have 30 stitches. So now I have 30 stitches for my 4th row. Again, we close this particular circle by slip stitching the first and the last double crochet stitches together. So this is how it's going to look like. So this is our first row. Second row we doubled up on our stitches. Our third row we alternate increase in stitches, and this 4th row we simply put 1 double crochet stitch per crochet stitch for the previous row. Okay, so let's keep doing that until we get to a fairly maybe regular looking hat for a very tiny person. Okay, so we have this hat. So I've created I think 2 more layers apart from the 4th layer of the same number of stitches. Okay, so that looks fairly normal, yeah. And this is where I ended up. Okay, if you take a look at this finished hat, finished to a certain degree anyway, we have these ear flaps. Okay. You could just simply put a triangle over there with equal distance from the front and the back. What I would normally do is I would put the ear flap a little bit closer to the rear, just a tiny bit closer to the rear than to the front. So if it's like for, let's say for a child, normally I would get orders for children's hats. And I'm using chunky wool, and I would normally use 4.5 millimeter. I would use, let's say, I would start off with 12 single crochet stitches and then decrease for every row. But since we're using this as a demonstration, and we only have 30 double crochet stitches for every row, that number will not work. So we'll just do it by eye. And you would start off with 1 chain. Let's say our ear flap might just need this length. So that's 4 stitches there. 4 single crochet. So we're changing our stitch from double to single crochet. So 4 stitches there. And then I'm going to decrease for every row. So I'm going to turn my work, do a chain, and then I'm going to decrease my stitch. So decrease single stitch is insert your hook in the first stitch, yarn over, pull through, insert your hook in the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, And then you finish that off by yarning over and pulling through all the loops. That's your decrease single stitch. And then do a regular single stitch in the last 2 stitches. Okay, so it's the same step. We turn your work, chain 1, decrease single stitch, and then single stitch in the last. And then do the same thing. In the last one you would have 2 stitches in the end. Yarn over, so we decrease the last 2 stitches there, and then we do a chain stitch just to close that off so that you don't unravel your work. Get your scissors, snip that off, pull that end. So that's your first ear flap. Okay. You might notice that you might have like a very slight join there. So you decide if you want to put that either towards the front or towards the back. So for me it doesn't really matter. Okay, so I'm going to switch over and I'm going to see where do the stitches align. And I started off, the first ear flap had 4 single crochet stitches. So I'm going to align and find out which 4 stitches correspond with the first ear flap. Let's say this one. Okay. So you join your yarn with that first stitch, and then you're going to chain stitch, and then you're going to work your first single crochet stitch. Now normally I would put this loose end to the front of my hook so I can hide it, okay, by working all my stitches around it. Okay. So single crochet stitch on the first stitch. Now if you're a bit confused about what did she say about that loose end, at this point you don't really need to know how to do that. You can always clean it up after you finish your work. Okay, so the important thing is you join your yarn by sort of like chaining through that first stitch, and then you make a chain stitch, and then you do a single crochet stitch on that. And then we're going to work additional single crochet stitches so that we end up with 4 single stitches there. Why 4? Because our first ear flap we started with 4 single crochet stitches. That's why it's 4. And then we're going to turn your work, chain 1, decrease single crochet, okay, and then single crochet stitch up to the end, which is additional 2 single crochet stitch. Turn your work, chain 1, and then you're going to decrease single crochet again. If you've forgotten how to do this, there are videos on my YouTube channel how to do this, and there are other also YouTubers who've demonstrated this particular stitch. Okay. So turn your work again, chain 1, and then we do a final decrease of single crochet before we chain 1 again and fasten off. Okay, so this is our mini hat. It's a nice way to start off and practice how to make hats through these mini hats. Okay, if you have any questions, please feel free to make comments below. Now, other examples of where I use this stitch, okay, would be our dragon hats. So we have on our website a pattern which demonstrates on how to make these dragon hats. And I also have finished products as well, so if you'd rather just grab a finished dragon hat, you're more than welcome to do so. So sometimes the camera doesn't work well with the colors, especially if they're all very contrasting. So it's supposed to be green with orange spikes. And we have ear flaps here. We also have the blue with scales. So we've got dragon hats with scales and spikes. And then we also have a red one with orange scales and spikes. Yeah. So, whichever color combination you want, it's really up to you. That's the beauty of creating these hats, is that you can choose whatever colors you want. But this particular way of making hats it's actually my favorite, because double crochet stitches, they grow your hat pretty quickly. Yep. And at the same time, you can embellish your hat. Like a simple hat, like a dragon hat. It's quite simple, easy to embellish and to decorate. And that's it. So if you have any questions, please feel free to comment down below or to shoot me a message on Facebook. We also have a website called criscrochet.co.uk. All right, see you later.